Today, we're taking psychology to the streets to ask Aussie workers about overcoming the burnout crisis. The research shows that levels of burnout peaked through the pandemic, but since then, those record highs have continued to trend upwards. So we're out here to ask people why they think this is happening and what they do to manage their burnout. And at the end, I'll reflect this with what the latest research says and provide some positive psychology strategies for managing burnout that the streets didn't seem to know about. So what do you both do for work?
We're paralegals.
So I'm a marketing and communications manager at a philanthropy organisation.
I work in M&A advisory.
I'm a barber and I've been doing it for 26 years.
I'm a technology consultant.
I'm a mechanic. By qualification, I've got a master's degree in IT.
I'm a housewife.
I work as a finance broker in Cairns.
What's your sort of favourite part of your job and what are the least favourite parts of your job?
My favourite parts is developing solutions for real world problems. Least favourite is sometimes it takes a lot of hard work and long hours to get the right solution.
Favourite things is I have an awesome team that I work with. We have a really good work-life balance. We go for lunches, we go to the races. Having a social aspect is really important to us.
I think we're quite lucky. Our firm sort of prioritises like work-life balance. So I would say out of a lot of the paralegals in Sydney, we kind of have it on the lucky side.
I think favourite parts, we get to work on sort of, relatively short-term engagement cycles across different industry sectors. So you really get to immerse yourself in different business problems. What comes with that, segueing into what my least favourite components are. There's often little downtime.
Burnout has sustained its sort of peak through COVID across the workplace in Australia. What do you think is driving that across the Australian sector? You obviously work client-facing, so what do you see in terms of what's happening out there?
Well, in the Australian technology sector, we're always fighting for talent. For the small pool of resources we have, there's a lot of work that needs to be done.
Obviously the work culture that we've got now after the pandemic is, I don't want to work in the city, but that's bad for your health. Because you're not communicating with people, you're at home.
We worked a bit from home during COVID, but we went back to the office pretty quickly, and I think that was a big help because we had the social aspect.
And you would get a really good cross-section of people because your shop's here in the city. So what sort of people come in do you feel like are really, you can see are burnt out? What sort of industries do they tend to be working in and why do you think there's a trend there?
I think the ones that would probably be burnt out the most are the ones that are starting at the bottom level. Society these days say that after 3 to 6 months you should get a promotion, you should get a job, and it's always, oh, why haven't I got a promotion yet? It's like, well, the older culture used to be you'd have to work 2 or 3 years before you got a promotion.
Was that a big factor for you in choosing the firm that you worked in terms of their work-life balance, or how did that weigh up against other factors like salary or career progression? How did you sort of weigh it up?
Work-life balance was definitely number one, I think, more important than anything else.
And how do you think that dichotomy between that financial aspect and then the charity aspect plays out in terms of sort of people's priorities for work-life balance? Does that impact how they work at your organisation at all?
Well, it's predominantly women-led organisation, so there's a lot of women high up levels. It translates a lot into people understanding work-life balance, particularly people with children and things like that. So that looks like part-time work being very normalised, a lot of people leaving at 3 p.m. to do kids, till 7 p.m. and then logging on for a couple of hours.
What were the things that your workplace does that when you applied you noticed was good for work-life balance, or what were the artefacts that you picked up on that made you want to apply there?
Yeah, good question. I don't know. I think it was probably more just having a sense that they wanted to get to know me as a person, as opposed to just just another application for a job, if that makes sense. I think a lot of the senior people that we spoke to, they did prioritise we play sport on the weekend, we do this, it's not all about work, and they definitely try and express that they live their own lives too, which is kind of nice to hear in the corporate world.
And how do you kind of detect when some of your employees are facing burnout and then manage it effectively, or what do you use to identify those things?
As a manager, you can have safe space, so it's an open door policy with staff.
Letting the managers or the people you're working with know that you've just come off a really busy engagement and that, you might need to take some time in those initial periods to sort of, get yourself started again and really ramp up again.
We're always cognizant of burnout, so it's a balance between work and rest. So it's just allocating the right people and the right times to the project and making sure they have the appropriate rest and recovery. Yeah.
What have you noticed in terms of how the people above you sort of walk the talk, so to speak?
I think it's something that you can tell now is more of a hot button sort of issue. People will talk about it. Whereas I think, even 10 years ago, they probably wouldn't have. So it's definitely on people's minds. And I think that's what's made it better, is that people actually feel comfortable talking about it, taking time off when they need it. But that also is something that I think is probably more exceptional than the norm, unfortunately, in Sydney. So
in terms of your own personal journey, how have you managed your own sort of burnout and work hours getting up through the ranks?
Yeah, making sure you're exercising. It's really hard to be at a desk all day. Yeah, 11 a.m. I do a walk for 15 minutes. Hi. And then again at 3 and lunch as well. So I figured out that I had to have 3 blocks in the day.
So just outside of work, and this is again around setting your own boundaries, just having a pretty structured approach to your working hours when you can. Obviously there's going to be ebbs and flows, but then knowing how to use those spare hours that you do have wisely to actually effectively wind down, exercise, that's a big thing for me. Even, sleeping and eating properly definitely comes into play, and it's all those little things that sort of add up.
But then, you do have to work hard, especially as you're coming up and you want people to... I used to overdo it. I used to work overtime so that, and log my extra hours and do so much extra work. And then I realised that I was the one who had to set the boundary in terms of I'm going to do my best up till 5:30 p.m. And then I'm going to do my best from 9 a.m. tomorrow. So I used to kind of be 7:30 and diminishing returns for your effort.
Have you ever sort of faced a lot of burnout or stress in sort of hustling to get where you were? And if you did, how did you manage that?
I have. For me, my home is my safe place. When I get home, I have got no tensions. When I go home, she's there, and I actually I forget everything. I leave everything out of the door when I come home.
So you're quite deliberate on keeping that space between home and work life. Is he quite true to his word on that when he comes home?
No. I think he plays a good role distinguishing between his professional and personal life. Yeah. So he's just leave his old tensions outside the door.
Yeah. I got to the point where I had to basically work with a psychologist to figure that out. I got a lot of, negative thoughts about my performance. No one was unhappy with my performance, but I was really harsh on myself, excessively so. And that made me perform at a higher standard. So I always thought it was good. Yep. It was actually really crippling inside because I couldn't step away. Yeah. So getting external support and having other people people would be like, we're really happy with your performance. And I'm thinking, but I wasted time for an hour last week and, I've got to make that back up. So just being easier on myself, we can't focus 100% of the time.
There have been some times when I have given 150%, but you need to know that if you take a step back or if you hold yourself for a few minutes, the world's not going to stop. Okay? But don't think that if you don't get this, your life will end there. Yep. It won't. You will have another opportunity.
When you reflect on the team environment where it felt most high performing, but also had the best sense of support for sort of stress and balance, what did that team environment look like and how did that get cultivated?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it starts with the senior managers on your team. So thinking about the best projects I've been on, you're working with partners or directors who don't micromanage you, and therefore you don't feel like you have a very watchful eye over you all the time, except they know when to effectively come in and provide you with support and collaborate. I think collaborating is really important so that, everyone has lives outside of work, and there might be times where you need support or other people in your team need support, and being able to effectively get together and, I guess collectively understand each other's differing needs and support requirements. That's usually been the best team environments that I've been in. So
how do you apply some of those principles to the barbershop you work in to try and create a great workplace culture with your team and staff?
Well, our team, we all work together. It's all about, we're in a small shop, so we have to work really hard together. So, it's just about talking. Even if you don't agree with people, we don't have to argue, but we can talk about differences and actually still get on, and then we can understand each other a bit more. The more we all agree, the less fun it's going to be, right?
I think going back to the office is super important, but I don't work in a city, so I don't know whether it's different here. I'm sure it is. Yep. Yeah.
Are you still working in Cairns? I guess the sun makes a difference, maybe. Yeah.
And I think it's just a much more casual way of life up there. Yeah.
A bit more hustle here. It's a bit toxic.
Less of the rat race. Yeah.
So that's what the streets had to say. Now let's have a look at what the research says around the burnout crisis. Burnout can be understood by the job demands resources model, where if we have too high job demands and not enough personal or job resources to meet those demands, that's when we can get into a burnout spiral. Yet if we have too few job demands and too high job or personal resources, then work might not be challenging or rewarding enough for us. So striking a balance is really important. Let me explain with some examples. The top 3 job demands include workload, role ambiguity or competing priorities, and interpersonal conflicts or a toxic work culture. Post-COVID, the shift towards online working has extended the average workday, creating an always-on culture that's thought to contribute to higher levels of burnout. If we have these high job demands, we need higher job or personal resources. 3 examples of job resources include autonomy, or feeling like you have discretion in your tasks, supportive relationships, both peer and managerial, and growth opportunities or adequate financial and non-financial rewards. 3 key examples of personal resources include physical health, diet, exercise, sleep, personality traits or cognitive skills, such as generally being a more optimistic person, and intrinsic motivation or a real passion for the work that you do. During COVID, the global macroeconomic uncertainty really drained our personal resources. Yet this has continued to persist with the current cost of living crisis and global wars continuing to create angst that's weighing us down. So let's compare this research to the street perspectives to understand how their knowledge could be improved or how their insights could help further establish research agendas. The street spoke about the importance of coming back to the office to feel supportive work relationships and create a greater boundary between work and life that was blurred during the always-on culture of COVID. Interestingly though, no one mentioned the flexibility or autonomy benefits of hybrid working, which have shown to be positive against burnout. Yet the net overall effect of this compared to the always-on culture could be better understood. People also spoke about high workloads driven by talent shortages. We know Australia is heavily reliant on skilled labour coming from overseas, and the research could further understand this impact on burnout. People also seem to understand how individual traits like perfectionism inhibit them, with the link with perfectionism and burnout well established in the literature. People also seem generally well versed on the importance of maintaining your physical health and creating boundaries and breaks to recharge and bounce back from work. However, there seemed to be a large gap in people's understanding of how finding meaning and motivation in your work can be protective against burnout. So to bridge this gap, I want to explain a little about a positive psychology intervention called job crafting, which can help. Job crafting involves crafting the way that you approach your work in a way that aligns more with your strengths and passions. This can promote greater satisfaction and motivation at work that boosts personal resources to protect against burnout. There are 4 main ways to job craft. The first is task crafting, which involves changing the type and nature of the tasks you do. For example, volunteering to run trainings to satisfy your love of coaching, or if you love Excel but hate report writing, swapping those tasks with someone that likes the opposite. Relational crafting involves more purposefully seeking to build relationships at work. For example, grabbing a coffee with someone outside your team to better understand and collaborate with different areas, or taking the time to learn something new about a colleague each day. Cognitive crafting involves reframing the way that you think about your work. For example, a cleaner at a hospital might think of themselves as a healer by making clean spaces, or a manager of junior staff might talk about their role as building the careers and confidence of young people. Skill crafting involves seeking out new experiences to build new skills. For example, Googling how to run meetings in agile methodology to transform a previously mundane task into something that's building a new skill, or doing a course to learn how to code. Now, obviously there are limits with this because there's a big risk that you can take on too much workload, that your motivation is trumped by exhaustion, or that you craft too much that you no longer add value for what you're paid to do. So doing this successfully really relies on engagement with employers. This can be done at performance evaluations and coaching conversations to building job crafting, along with employers organising job crafting swap meets so that employees can swap tasks that they care about. In summary, job crafting highlights how meaning making is a skill that can be developed, that can boost motivation and personal resources to protect against burnout. Being intentional about bringing your strengths and passions to work is underrated. Now, of course, there are limits, but doing so could see a more productive and happy Australian workforce. So at your next conversation with your manager or coach, think about one way you could better build your strengths and passions into your daily work.